What do Mother Teresa and Elvis Presley have in common? Mother Teresa and Elvis Presley are well-known figures from our history, and they were people of faith. I bet some of you didn't even know that about Elvis. Now, even if you don't know that much about these two individuals, if I was to ask you, out of these two, who would you say was a good role model in regards to being a person of faith? You'd say Mother Teresa, right? Mother Teresa was a Catholic nun. She won the Nobel Prize for Peace. She set up organizations. She is known for doing some outstanding missionary charitable work. She decided from the age of 12 that she wanted to be a missionary, and she dedicated her life to serving others, with her main focus being helping the poor and the sick. She was even declared as a saint by the Catholic Church. But as a significant woman of faith in history, I was surprised to read in the news recently that Mother Teresa struggled spiritually. Who knew? A book was published 10 years after her death. The book was like a collection of her personal writings in which she expressed experiencing deep loneliness, and she struggled to find God in a world of pain and suffering. Mother Teresa struggled to find God. Her book reveals that she had a lifelong struggle with her faith in God, and she refers to a period of time where she says she experienced the dark night of the soul. This phrase is Catholic theology, basically referring to a period of extreme spiritual agony where you don't experience God's presence. She wrote, and I quote, "I am told God lives in me, and yet the reality of darkness and coldness and emptiness is so great that nothing touches my soul." As a woman of faith, I would expect her to be filled with the Spirit and experience joy, peace and fulfillment, God's love. I mean, I know we all have off days and we go through some stuff that makes us maybe question God. And she must have seen some stuff. But you wouldn't expect someone walking with God to say, "Nothing touches my soul." Now, I'm aware that the personal writings of someone's thoughts doesn't necessarily equate to what we might surmise from reading it. I have often had mysterious, weird, maybe even dark wonderings that if I was to ever verbalize or if I wrote down, someone else might be quite concerned and question my faith. It's the same for any person really, and so I do not stand in judgment against the late Mother Teresa. However, what I do find interesting is the way we put people on a pedestal and look up to them and say, wow, look at her. She loved God so much. She was such a good woman of faith. This is what they teach you in school. I even done a report on her. She didn't even bother with things like career or marriage, having her own family. She was a dedicated, outstanding servant of God. We should all be like her. And I mean, she did do some very admirable things. There's a lot of religions out there that have a work-based faith, believing that in order to please God, there are certain things we must do, certain criteria we must pass in order to gain the blessings of God. But the Bible doesn't teach that. You know, I don't know enough about Mother Teresa or the Catholic religion to comment any further on whether she had a work-based faith. But I put her in comparison to Elvis Presley for a reason. I know, weird comparison, huh? Elvis Presley, completely different to Mother Teresa. American singer, musician and actor, known as the king of rock and roll, had huge success and became a cultural icon and one of the most famous musicians of all time. His music career began in the 50s, but he became a Christian in the 70s and was baptized. Now, the reason I've compared these two iconic historical figures is because we look at what is out there about them and we make our opinions. Mother Teresa, God's girl, Elvis, rock and roll. Isn't that the devil's music? Have you heard the lyrics to Hound Dog? There's lots of questions around his faith and his lifestyle. And honestly, he's not known for being a man of faith. But did you know, because of his influence, many fans of his also decided to follow Jesus? He made a decent contribution to the gospel music scene of the day, with albums and concerts performing religious songs and hymns. And he donated, I'm sure, a sizable amount to Christian organizations and charities. After he was baptized, people would continue to call him the king, and he would say, "There's only one king." No, let me not do an impression. He would say, "There's only one king, and that's Jesus." Now, in the news recently, it was shared that when Elvis died, they found that he had 3 Bibles next to his bed. Bibles that you can see that he actually read, with many passages highlighted. Apparently, he read every day and he carried his Bible everywhere with him. One of the Bibles was recently sold at auction for $120,000. I'm going to assume the person who bought it wasn't a Christian. That bit of information is neither here nor there. I just thought it was interesting. Now, Elvis didn't write a book about how he felt about his faith. But if you look into it, there's plenty out there that reveals that the power of God changed his whole life, his whole outlook and what he experienced. Unlike Mother Teresa, what you would expect someone to feel when walking with Christ. Victorious, brand new, changed, enlightened, loved. What point am I trying to make here? Every single one of us, rich, poor, famous or your average Joe, a self-sacrificing nun or the king of rock and roll, we all have an individual journey with God. And it doesn't really matter how it appears on the outside. I mean, it matters a little, but really what matters is what is in your heart. Do you love the Lord? Where does your fulfillment come from? Riches? From works? Or from Jesus? The Bible tells us we will have trouble. We may have things we need to change, get rid of, look into. We may have a past that is looking very different to our future. We may stumble and fall. Or we may have been in church our whole life, serving, being a good Christian. We will still have struggles, questions, unbelief, moments where we question God. Don't watch anyone else's journey. Just pay attention to your own. Don't seek to follow anyone, no matter how famous they are or how Christian they appear. Michael Todd, Jackie Hill Perry, T.D. Jakes, they have their struggles too. They aren't perfect. Make Christ the one you look up to. Make him the one you follow. We all have a relationship with God, and those relationships are personal. Our journeys are individual, and there's always a lot of work for God to do on us and through us. Colossians 3:1-2 says, "Since then you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things or people." Over and out.